Now before we get into actually making these beautiful burritos, we're gonna make some homemade flour tortillas. And they require a little bit of resting time, so we're gonna get those started first. I'm taking this recipe from the New York Times. These are Sonoran style flour tortillas. 10 ounces, all-purpose flour. So in case you don't have a scale, I'm also gonna measure these in cups, and those ingredients are gonna be in the recipe linked in the description. Once I got 10 ounces of flour, I'm gonna add 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt, and then 1.25 teaspoons of baking powder. Then I need about 5 ounces of water at 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and then 3 ounces of lard melted. Give the dry ingredients a whisk, then get that into a stand mixer, or you could use a food processor as well. Get it going and slowly drizzle in the lard until it's fully incorporated into the flour, then slowly drizzle in the water. Once everything's incorporated and has come together, jack up the speed a few notches and then let that knead for 5 to 10 minutes. Once it comes together into a ball, get it out of the mixer. So it should be a little wet and tacky. Just gonna knead it a little bit by hand, get it into a ball, coat in plastic wrap, and let it sit for 2 hours. So this is a McDonald's sausage breakfast burrito. This was my childhood. This is what I grew up eating for breakfast. And it was my favorite thing. These were little sausage and egg burritos. Little tiny burritos. Could fit in the palm of your hand. Usually you got 2 of them. And obviously a McDonald's item is fast and convenient, which is the whole point. Haven't tried one in a while. So let's take a look inside. Looks like we've got little balls of some breakfast sausage. Looks like American cheese is nicely melted, and about 1 scrambled egg. Looks like not a lot. Looks like real egg. Not a lot of vegetables. It's a good starting point, but I want to up the amount of veg and also add potato and still be able to reheat these guys up in the morning in about 30 seconds. Now I just want to open it up and I want to see how much of the content there is inside of the burrito, so I can make sure I don't overstuff them. I'm gonna say about a 1/2 cup, probably even less than a half. I think I can get away with about a 1/2 cup, maybe a little less in mine. Now they kind of roll it like a fajita. And of course a little hot sauce. Now it's honestly not bad, not great. On its own, it's not as good as when it has hot sauce. So that means the hot sauce is sort of covering some flavor up. Obviously we can do better. So now while the dough continues to rest, we can prep some of the other ingredients. Got about a 1/2 pound of Italian sausage. You can also use breakfast sausage. I'm just gonna kind of create these little meatballs by squeezing it out of its casing. Pinch a little bit out. Little sausage meatballs. I keep this chilled in the fridge. Onto the breakfast potatoes, we want a really fine dice. Just like we crumbled the sausage into nice fine bite-sized pieces, we want to do the same with the potato. On a nice even small dice, and once they're all diced up, we're gonna toss them into a pot of water. We're gonna rinse that starch off a few times with some cold water, fill it back up with some cold water, add a little bit of salt. We wanna bring those potatoes up to a boil and then down to a simmer and let those go until they're about halfway cooked. We're gonna let those potatoes get par cooked, and while that happens, we can chop up maybe half this onion, about half this bell pepper, and the whole jalapeno. Fine dice on everything. And what you can do is peel out some layers, push it into the board. This way you can get really fine dice really easily. I think that's about all I need. That's around a 1/2 cup, I'd say. Just flatten the bell pepper out, thin strips, and then into a fine dice, just like the onion. Then the same thing with the jalapeno. Quick tip about jalapenos: when you're dicing them, go very slow or you risk some of that jalapeno juice getting in your eye, and that's no fun. I just got a squirt on the cheek, so I dodged the bullet. We got our vegetable dice. We're gonna set this off to the side. But now the potatoes should be half cooked, not fully tender. And we can drain them of the water and just set those off to the side. And then in a non-stick pan over medium-high heat, we're gonna add a little bit of oil. And once the pan's hot, get those sausage balls into the pan. We wanna make sure they're nicely separated, and then we're gonna let them sit so they can brown. Once you start to get color on one side, you can start to toss them around to get even color, and we just want to cook them through. We don't want to overcook them at all. You want to go high heat here. Once they're just cooked through, we want to strain them of their oil so that we can get that oil back into the pan and use it to cook the potatoes. And we're going to get those potatoes in, and we're just going to let them be. We want to develop nice color on them. Don't move them too much at first. Let that color develop. Season them with some salt. Then once you see some browning developing on the other side, then you can start to toss them around and get that browning action happening on all sides of the potatoes. Just keep working them until they start to brown and get nice and crispy, like good breakfast potatoes should be. Once you can see all the breakfast potatoes are starting to brown and get crisp, then we can transfer them out of the pan alongside the sausage. Get that pan back onto the heat with a little bit more olive oil, and then we can add the vegetables. And we just want to cook those until they're nicely softened and barely start to begin to brown. Add a little bit of salt. Once the vegetables have softened and are starting to lightly brown, get them out of the pan. Now we've got our crispy potatoes, our sausage pre-cooked, along with our medley of vegetables. It's been about 2 hours. We can cut up and divide our dough, and then we need to let that rest again for like another 30 minutes. I'm just gonna cut it down the middle. Try to be as even as you can. And I'm gonna go for 8. So in half, and then each of those halves in half. I'll make those into nice balls. I use the palm of my hand. Just use that curvature of your hand to shape the balls. If there's any open creases in the balls, just seal them shut and set those off to the side. And cover those guys again. Let those rest for another 30 minutes before we roll them out. And then at this point, I can start to get a cast iron pan preheated to cook them. Now it's true, I don't always eat breakfast every morning, but what I do consume every morning is our sponsor today, Morning Brew. Before Morning Brew, I'd kind of get stuck into this non-stop news cycle that we're accustomed to these days. I don't enjoy it. It's not good for my health or my stress levels. But now that Morning Brew's free email newsletter gets delivered into my inbox, I can now keep up to date with today's news in a way that I enjoy. In about 5 minutes, I can get fully up to speed on the markets and the news of the day in business, finance, and tech. But it's not these long, complicated articles, nor is it superficial headline skimming. You basically get the who, what, where, when, how, and what it all means in the macro sense and how it might affect you. Traditional news is dry and boring, but Morning Brew articles are witty and relevant, and they speak the language of my generation so we can relate to it. They're doing a really good job keeping up with the pandemic and how Delta affects jobs and our economy, which affects every single one of us. Presents all the information in such a way that we can just wrap our heads around it. And of course, if you like that traditional paper vibe, every newsletter includes a crossword puzzle or a game if you're into that kind of thing. So if you're into business, finance, or tech, there's literally no reason to not subscribe to Morning Brew. It's free and it takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. So go down to the link in my description and subscribe to Morning Brew today. Now it's been about 30 minutes, and before we roll out our tortillas, I need some wrappers for the burritos. So I'm gonna measure out 10-inch by 10-inch wax paper. If it's a little long, I'll just adjust the sizes. You don't have to be crazy about the measurements, but I am. So we got a nice square. Set these off to the side. Then we're gonna need a few more sheets of the wax paper, but a bit longer in order to help us roll out the tortillas. The trick here is rolling these out as thin as possible. You wanna sort of get it thin enough to see through it. If it's too thick at all, you gotta keep rolling it out. Roll and rotate to keep a nice circular shape. Quarter turns and roll. As you roll it out, it's gonna suck up some of that flour. If it ever starts to stick, or if you ever roll out a crease in the dough, it means you need a little bit more flour. As the dough gets larger, you don't have to rotate the dough anymore, you can rotate your body. As you can see, I rolled this little crease in there. It's telling me I need a little bit more flour. And I start in the middle of the dough and work either outwards or towards me, depending on which way I'm rolling. And just when you think you've rolled it thin enough, go even further until the edges of the dough even start to smear on the board. And then pick it up and add it on top of the parchment paper. Put another layer of parchment paper on top and then roll it out even further and set that off to the side. And repeat with the rest of the dough. Again, getting it as thin as possible on the board. And then we can transfer that on top of the parchment paper, building more layers and allowing us to get every layer a little bit thinner than it was before as we keep adding more sheets on top of each other. There's like a compression going on as you roll the sheets out on top of each other. It also helps prevent them from sticking to each other. So just make your way through the dough until you've rolled them all out as thin as possible. So we can scramble the eggs. I'm gonna go with about 6 eggs. I think that should be enough. By now the cast iron pan should be sufficiently heated. If the pan is hot enough, these are gonna cook in about 30 to 40 seconds. You get them into the pan, they should instantly start to steam and bubble up within 15 seconds. Once there's slight browning on the first side, give it a flip. 20 seconds on the other side and they're done. You store them in a pot with a towel to allow them to continue to steam and soften. Now, if the pan is too cool or you cook these too long, they're going to dry out and become brittle and stiff, and they're not going to be pliable and flexible and allow you to roll out burritos. Just make sure you got enough heat and you're only cooking these no more than like 40 seconds each. Then we're gonna take a non-stick pan, get that on like a medium heat, not too high. Add a little bit of butter, swirl it around the pan. Then we're gonna season the scrambled eggs and get those into the pan and just cook those nice and gently until they start to kind of come together a little bit. And once they've come together and are not like a loose scrambled egg mixture, then I kill the heat and I toss in some cold butter. That cold butter is gonna cool the eggs down and also make them nice and glossy, and the residual heat of the pan will finish cooking them through. As soon as they're done, get them out of the pan or else you're gonna risk them overcooking. This is how I like my scrambled eggs. I like a little texture to them. If you like them runnier, you cook them runnier. Now, what I'd like to do is combine all of these things. Gently work this in. You don't want to mush up the eggs, but you want all those ingredients kind of evenly distributed so you get them in every bite. Very gentle. Just kind of fold and pull from the bottom up. So now we have our scrambled egg, potato, sausage mixture, and we've got our half cup measure. Now we've got our wrappers, which we're going to orient like a diamond. Then we have some American cheese. First, we got our beautiful tortillas. They're nice and pliable, which is what you want. Let's measure them so we know what we're working with. Around 9 inches, which is larger than probably the tortilla that McDonald's uses, but this is fine. This is nice and thin. We're gonna get a nice little burrito. Not gonna be too small, not gonna be too big. Take 1 sheet of American cheese and I fold it into thirds, right along like this. We take about a half cup of our mixture. Doesn't have to be packed tightly. Get it sort of evenly mixed right on top of the American cheese. Now McDonald's only folds one way, like a fajita. I'm gonna roll it like a burrito. So take in the edges. Once they meet, press down and pull back. Then fold so that they tops meet, and then pull back until you reach where the stuff is. And then sort of fold, and then fold. And you can take the paper, wrap it until you get halfway. Once you get halfway, fold over, continue to wrap. Seal it up with some tape, and there you have it. A prepped breakfast burrito ready to go. Just go through and bang out the rest of the burritos, and you've got burritos prepped and ready to go throughout the week. So now I got 7 burritos. If you don't want to make the tortillas yourself, make sure you get tortillas around 8.5 inches so that they end up being as big as you want. You can go through and label all the burritos. Let's give one a shot now, compare it to McDonald's. This one sucks now after tasting this. Clear winner. I mean, get this out of here. It's everything I remember and love about the McDonald's breakfast sandwich as a kid, except it's a little bit more suitable for my palate as an adult. Your kids will love it. Everyone's gonna love it. The idea is you can pop these in the fridge. These should last 4 to 5 days. Otherwise, you can throw them in the freezer. And then in the morning, you pop it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. Now, depending on how thick you rolled them and the power of your microwave, it might take more than 30 seconds. Maybe 40 seconds, maybe 35. You're gonna have to be the judge of that. But for the most part, you pop them in the microwave, give them a flip halfway through, make sure each side gets evenly heated, and you got breakfast in no time. You really must give this a try. Links are down in the description. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and then go feed yourself. So if you want more breakfast recipes, I've got 4 on the screen right now. One of my personal favorites is this New York City fried bacon, egg, and cheese with some caramelized pickled red onions. Classic sandwich. You gotta try it.